strikeouts in a game. 20.
Swung on and driven to deep left. And it's high. Number 8. Yankees win. Yankees win. Bernie Williams homers deep in the left field seat to lead off the 11th inning on a 1-run finish. And the Yankees beat the Orioles 5-4 to win Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. Burn, baby, burn. He's done it again.
There it goes! Stepping into history. He's done it. He has done it. 62. Aaron Judge is the American League single-season home run leader. The AL King. Case closed.
What is going on, baseball fans? Jeremy Latacuente here, back at it once again, bringing you our continuation of the state of the franchise. From championship glory to rebuilding years, every team has a story. And the story that we are discussing today is that of the Seattle Mariners. But before we get into that discussion, make sure if you're following us here on this YouTube channel, that you hit that like and subscribe button as well as the bell for post notifications. So each and every time we drop new content like this series, you will be notified. And make sure you check out our description for our link tree that has all the pertinence to our merch store, sponsor links, including our new affiliate with Topps, as well as social platforms and audio platforms. And if you're on the audio side, make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review. Now, as we get to discussing the Seattle Mariners, I am honored to bring on my guest, Mike. What's going on, Mike?
Hey, Jeremy. Thank you for having me. First of all, longtime Mariners fan, born and raised out in the Pacific Northwest, based in the UK now. That's why it's a little bit dark around me, but real excited for a season where I think we could genuinely be looking at some all-time numbers, at least from the pitching side. And if the bats can do just enough, I think this could be a year for Mariners fans that we haven't seen, with one little exception, and we'll get there in quite some time.
For sure. It's going to be interesting. So as we always begin this series, we kind of look and take a little bit of a retrospective, a gut reaction. So I want to know your gut reaction and feelings on the 2024 campaign for the Mariners.
Oh man, that is a tough season to think back on, because obviously I look back at it, and baseball, it's a long grind. It's a long season, obviously 6 months, half the year you're playing. And when I look back at seasons retroactively, I always kind of look at how I felt coming out every month. And I remember early on in that season, it felt like a sure thing. It seriously felt like a sure thing that we were going to see a return to playoff baseball. The pitching rotation was dominant. The offense was not great, but it never really is. But it was doing enough. And then there was that skid through the middle of the summer. We just tumbled down the standings, and it very quickly went from a sure thing to very touch and go. And before we knew it, we were on the outside looking in, obviously letting Scott Service go, giving the reins to Dan Wilson, which was an interesting choice. Obviously, no major league managerial experience. He's been with the club for a long time. When I was in my very early stages of Mariners fandom, I'm talking 4 or 5 years old, he was our catcher, and they gave him the reins. But honestly, the clubhouse culture was supposedly phenomenal under him. We'll get there as well, because Justin Turner just did a very interesting interview with Bob Nightingale a couple days back that we'll definitely be touching on. The team did rebound a bit under Dan, but it was just too little too late. We missed by 1 game. So when I look at the season as a whole, I mean, you can't help but look at it as a waste when you look at number 1 pitching staff in baseball, far and away in multiple metrics, paired with the 29th offense. It's just really a waste of what could have been. When you say the postseason runs on a good pitching staff, you can't help but think, if you get in with that staff, who was going to stop them? And the
sure.
potential was a first AL pennant, a first World Series appearance. I don't think they had it to beat the Dodgers, but the potential was there to end that stigma of being the only team that has never won a pennant, and the offense just didn't get it done.
Yeah, so let's touch on it. In terms of Justin Turner's comments, for those that may not know, kind of let them know the mostly pretty much what he said and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, sure. I just actually read this a couple days ago, but Bob Nightingale did, and Bob Nightingale's an awesome reporter, does a great job covering the league. Did an interview with Justin Turner, who in the offseason, for those who might not know, signed with the Chicago Cubs. Late season around the trade deadline acquisition last year. I genuinely thought he was going to be more of a clubhouse guy. He's getting on there in years, but he still put up pretty good numbers for us. He was a real impact player, real impact acquisition. And the meat and potatoes of what JT said was from inside the clubhouse, a lot of things that us fans were thinking. What is the front office doing? There's 3 guys in that room, at least, who are potential Cy Young contenders. And the only move from outside the organization that we made on a major league deal was Donovan Solano. We brought Rowdy Tellez in on a minor league deal. We bought Miles Mastrobuoni in. He'll most likely make the squad because he's a solid utility guy. But the only major league name that we brought in was Donovan Solano, and we brought Jorge Polanco back. He'll move from second to third. Justin Turner said he was sitting and waiting for a call from the Mariners. He was keen to be back. He liked the clubhouse culture under Dan Wilson. And he was waiting and waiting for a call that never came. And he took a $6 million deal to go to the South Side, be a Cub. But his words that stuck with me were, if he had gotten the call and he had come back to Seattle, which he was keen to do, and he got back in the room and it was just him, he would have been there thinking, all right, guys, what are we doing? Are we even trying here? And it's hard as a Mariners fan to look at your front office, to look at general manager Justin Hollander, to look at, I believe they're calling him the president of baseball operations now, Jerry DiPoto, running the show, and say, look, Pete Alonso was on the market. He was a slam dunk. Justin Turner's words, not mine. How do you let Pete Alonso go? How do you let Bregman go when you can take a guy who might not be in his prime with the bat anymore, but at the very least, he's an elite defensive third baseman who's still above average with the bat? How do you let him go to Boston when you can take a dude from your chief division rival and put him straight into your lineup? Now, there are some acquisitions, some additions who are prove it deals, who are take a chance guys, who I think should break camp with this club. I think Rowdy Tellez has looked very strong this spring training. And I realize he's very much a 3 true outcome, feast or famine type hitter. But with Edgar Martinez, a very contact, get the ball in play mindset in the hitting department, as well as hitting coach Kevin Seitzer, I think this is a team that can make the most of a guy like Tellez. I don't think he's a starter, especially not with Luke Raley at first base. But I think he's a guy you can put on the bench. You can have him there as the 25th guy on the roster, and he can make an impact DHing. He can play first base when he needs to. He's never going to be a dude who you can move around, be a utility guy. But he's a bat that can be very dangerous. But at the same time, as said, there were names. There were the Pete Alonsos and the Alex Bregmans out there, and we're coming out of it with Miles Mastrobuoni, Donovan Solano, and Rowdy Tellez. You got to be a little bit frustrated with that.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to me, that's been the biggest knock on Seattle over the last several years has been the offense and the fact that it kind of went unanswered. It kind of went tended to by the front office. It is something that's going to be interesting to see how it kind of plays out.
The tough thing for me is you look over the past few years, you look at the comments from Justin Turner, you look at the comments from a guy like Teoscar Hernandez, who was obviously with the M's for 1 year, had a career low, and then left in free agency, joined the Dodgers, had a bounce back year, and now he's got a ring. And he was complaining in interviews that for him, it felt like the batter's eye wasn't straight, and he struggled to pick the ball up. And as a lifelong Mariners fan, I look at a lot of guys. I look at a lot of numbers. One that comes to mind is Adrian Beltre. Had superstar numbers as a Dodger. Was good. He was an all-star at least once as a Mariner. But they were still the worst years of his career. He went to Texas. He went to Boston. And he was a rock star. And he's a Hall of Fame baseball player now. He had down numbers with Seattle. And it's very seldom I've seen hitters play to, compared to their time with other teams, their full potential, so to speak, as a Mariner. Raul Ibanez comes to mind. Ibanez had some very good years as a Mariner. But you sit there as an M's fan and you can't help but think, what could some of these guys have done if they played their whole career somewhere else? And you think you have to start to give some credence to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going to be something that, I think the team has to kind of take a look at now with, all these different players have coming out and making, comments about the batter's eye and how the ballpark plays to the offense. So it's an interesting thing to think about, that it's one of the most beautiful parks to look at. But if you're standing in that box as a home player and unable to do damage because of the way the ballpark is set up, it's something that has to be addressed if the team wants to compete long term. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens over these next coming couple of years.
It's definitely concerning as a fan because the more and more these players come out, the more and more you have to think of it. Obviously, I'm not a Major League Baseball player. I've never been one. Had some family friends who have, but that's neither here nor there. None of them were power guys. And that is where you see the big impact of Seattle. It's always these power guys that struggle, these feast or famine hitters. Their K numbers go up. Yes, being down at sea level, being somewhere where it's colder a lot of the year does impact the ability to drive the ball. I've played many a game myself in weather like that, and I live gap to gap as a hitter myself because I know that in that type of weather, driving the ball is just a recipe for flyouts. But you do worry as a fan that when these guys come up, these huge names, these Pete Alonsos, for example, there's no effort or there's no evidence that the M's approached Pete Alonso, but there's also nothing saying that they didn't. And the question I have as a fan is, if you're Pete Alonso, a guy who mashes, a guy who relies on hitting the ball out of the yard, and a guy who already is a fairly high K rate hitter, do you look at what these Teoscar Hernandez guys are saying, what Justin Turner said this offseason, and does it make you shy away from a place where you know your pitchers are going to give you a chance to win, where you know one swing can bust a game open because the odds of the opposing team scoring 4 or 5 runs on any given night is pretty low? Do you still question, for the sake of my numbers, for the sake of what people are going to be looking at when it's time for that next contract, do I want to bet on myself that way and risk hamstringing myself by playing 81 games a year at T-Mobile Park? It'll always be safe go to me. But
Same.
that's where I really worry is, are guys actually scared of coming here? Are guys actually unwilling to come here? And does it make it that we have to win on the back of the pitching and we have to win by developing prospects and through the draft because it's just a non-starter for free agents? I don't know that. I'm not close enough to the minds of big leaguers to know that. I certainly hope it's not the case. But in a sport like baseball, no salary cap, obviously, you see the disparity with the clubs like the Dodgers, with the clubs like the Yankees. It's definitely concerning to have something that is a documented drawback that you can't do anything about. You can't change the ballpark, just like you can't change the umpires, you can't change the ball. If you can't change the ballpark and players don't want to come there, it doesn't matter how good the culture is, it doesn't matter how good the pitching is. You've got to go with what you've got, and we've been very lucky that we've brought up guys like Julio Rodriguez, like Cal Raleigh, like Ty France before we traded him off to Cincinnati last year, picking him up and kind of resurrecting his career from the San Diego Padres. Great trade. But the established free agents, with the exception of Robbie Cano, in my lifetime, I'm 28, the established free agents have not come to Seattle. And I know that that needs to change for teams to win. You look at the teams that have won. It's the Rangers behind a guy like a Corey Seager acquisition. It's the Dodgers signing everyone and their mother. It's not teams developing draft picks alone, with the exception of the Nationals a few years back. And Houston did it very well. But even then, Houston developed a core and they brought guys in from the outside. I can't think of the last time a team won a title based solely on homegrown players. And I'm sure someone in the YouTube comments will be able to tell me where it is. And I'm going to feel very stupid looking at it, but it's got to be pretty far back. Even those Nationals teams, Howie Kendrick was a journeyman guy. So if you can't get free agents to come, it's just a very bleak outlook.
Now, mentioning bleak outlooks, when you look at the league right now, injuries are all the rage. And MLB.com has a couple of guys on your injured list that kind of stand out in Matt Brash and Jackson Coart. Of those injuries, which one is kind of the one that stands out to you most? And is there a player that you're kind of looking at as a potential injury concern for the season?
It's actually neither right now, because just today, as we're getting ready to record this, they've come out with the news that George Kirby will start the season on the IL with shoulder inflammation. It should only be a week-to-week thing, but it always concerns me when you get the front office coming out and saying these things like, we're not giving a timeline, we're shutting him down as a precautionary measure because we don't want it to be something he's dealing with all season. That's why I say there's probably 3 guys in that room that can be a Cy Young, because honestly, Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo, you just look at the whole rotation top to bottom. When you look at a rotation that is Castillo, Gilbert, Brian Wu, George Kirby, how am I spacing on the 5th guy? Help me out here. It's late. Kirby, Gilbert, Castillo, Wu.
Bryce Miller.
Bryce Miller, yes, absolutely. I love that guy. He started the last game I went to when I was back in Seattle in 2023. You look at Castillo, Gilbert, and Miller, and they're so talented that even if George Kirby misses 3 starts, those guys could put up such good numbers that Kirby can't catch them. And I honestly think Kirby might be the most talented pitcher out of the 5. The way he locates, he reminds me of Greg Maddux with velo. So the big injury concern for me is, how long are we missing Kirby? If it's 2 starts, okay, we can live with that. It's not an incredibly devastating schedule to start the season, luckily. But if it's a month, if it drags on, if they try to bring him back too early and he's not at full effectiveness, that's where I really worry. Of the ones that are on the injured list right now, for me, I look at a potential return that could be a big impact will be Matt Brash. What I saw from him, obviously, when we brought him up as a prospect, they said he was going to be a starter. The embarrassment of riches that this team has at the starting pitching position, and it's only going to get stronger. You've got the guys, the Emerson Hancocks of the world, who are the 6 or 7 starter in the organization, who won't even break camp with the big league ball club, but will see time as injury replacements. Hancock Mind you, he might break camp now that Kirby is down. But the decision was made very early on because Brash did struggle with command early in his career to, hey, put him in the pen. And he started throwing harder. Balls started breaking more because he could go max effort straight away. And I think he's a guy who, the quicker you get him back, the quicker you get him in his rehab stints, send him to single A Everett, which for those of you not from the Pacific Northwest is 20 minutes up the road from Seattle. Send him to AAA Tacoma, which is 30 minutes the other direction from Seattle. Give him a good solid rehab stint. Make sure his command's there because he has always struggled with the walks, with the hit batters. And Matt Brash is a guy who's just pure stuff, pure filth, is probably the number 1 or 2 option, might even be the closer for some ball clubs. And he's just a solid mid-relief option. He's a bullpen depth arm who will really make an impact. The quicker he gets back, the better. So to answer the question in short, it's George Kirby as a major concern right now. And it's Matt Brash, the biggest impact when he returns, hopefully before the weather starts getting warm in June.
Now, as we go through this series, one of my favorite sections is the X Factor, right? So, who do you see as the X Factor for the 2025 Seattle Mariners?
Oh, man. See, that's the thing. There's so many easy answers to this. There's Julio Rodriguez, who should be most people's early top 5 picks for AL MVP. There's Cal Raleigh, who I think is a shoo-in if he stays healthy for the All-Star start at catcher. Baltimore Orioles fans, I love you guys. I love your team. Adley Rutschman's a superstar, but those are the 1A at catcher, not just in the AL, but in the whole of baseball. Genuinely, I think if you're asking me the best talent and the guy we need to lock down, I think it is Cal Raleigh. I think if you had to tell me we've got to part with one guy, we've got to part with Julio, or we've got to part with Cal Raleigh, I'd really struggle with that choice. Obviously, Julio's on a long-term deal. It'd never happen. But I think the most important question for our next offseason in 2025 going into 2026 is you've got to get the big dumper locked down long-term. And eventually, when Harry Ford's ready to come up, potentially you got, as much as he's an amazing defensive catcher, you might want to go Joe Mauer with Cal Raleigh years down the line, get him out from behind the plate because he's such an impact player on both sides of the baseball. When you ask me for an X factor, I can name anyone on the pitching staff. You've got 3, 4, maybe even 5 potential Cy Youngs if Brian Wu has a breakout year. He's got the stuff to be an ace for a lot of clubs. It's just so strong around him. So when you ask me for an X factor, I don't think you can really pick any of those guys because you've got to expect them to have big years if you want this Mariners team to contend. So I'm going to go off the board a little bit, and I'm going to say my X factor for this 2025 Mariners team is not in center. It's not in center. You're not looking at Julio. You're looking right over here in left field at Randy Arozarena. The guys I just listed are must-haves, and the guys I've just listed are safe bets to have very strong seasons. These are superstar players. These are, if you play MLB The Show out there, these are 85, 90 plus rated players on the show. These are guys who you want to get your Diamond Dynasty cards. But Randy Arozarena is one of those dudes. You look at him, he was a mid-season acquisition when the Mariners didn't really know, would they stay or would they go? Would they be buyers? Would they be sellers? What do you want to do? They brought in Randy Arozarena. And he was solid. He was okay. But he wasn't earth-shattering. The question is, what sort of Randy are we getting? And you can extend this to Victor Robles in right field as well. These are 2 guys who are very serviceable big leaguers, have been in the league for a long time. And if they play to their full potential, if you get the Randy Arozarena that you saw at his peak in Tampa Bay a couple years back, this is a dangerous team as it is. And I think the front office has bet on what they've got in the room. I think you can make an argument, and we will get there, that what they've got in the room in the division that they're in might be enough. And I think where Mariners fans are upset is not that they've mortgaged the team. It's not that they've sat here and said, oh, we're just going to suck. We're just going to be a 100-loss ball club. We're just going to be, what we were in the late 2000s, early 2010s, non-competitive 500 or below ball club. I think the reason Mariners fans are upset, me included, is they've sat there and said what we have in the room is enough. And in principle, that's not a horrible idea. But when you've got guys available on the market that you can afford, that fill the holes that your team has clearly and obviously, and there's no sign of an effort being made for them, that's where fans get frustrated. But at Rosarena, if he plays like a Tampa Bay Rosarena, then you're looking at a lineup that through the middle looks something like top to bottom. You could arrange it, say, Crawford, Robles, Julio, Raleigh, Arozarena, put Rayleigh in the 6th spot potentially. Mitch Garver, that's another one you could pick. Mitch Garver had a dreadful year last year, and there is arguments to be made that it was that same Seattle bugaboo that caught Teoscar Hernandez, that caught Justin Turner, and maybe he adjusts and bounces back, or maybe he's another one of those names like Beltre, like Teoscar, where the team ends up moving on from him and he bounces back somewhere else, and you just look at those Seattle years as what happened to Mitch Garver? Seattle happened to Mitch Garver. But you look at that lineup, and if everybody produces to potential, it's a lot stronger team than it looks. But that's
For
a
sure.
huge ask, especially in this ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, in looking at the team, obviously Kyle Riley is an easy one to say because of being, in my opinion, the best catcher in baseball, being able to do what he does on both sides of the ball. So I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. But the guy for me that kind of stands out as the X factor is JP Crawford. We saw a couple of years ago, he made some adjustments to his swing and he started to produce a bit better. But then things kind of shifted on him. So it's going to be interesting to see how he bounces back in 2025 and what that could mean for the club as a whole. So he's the guy that I kind of peg as the X factor for this season for the M's to be successful.
Yeah, that's a very good take. I think it's a lot the same concept as what I have to say about Randy. I don't think you look at an X factor with these Mariners because I think there are a lot of superstars on this team. There are a lot of superstars that, whether it's East Coast bias in the media, whether it's people don't stay up on the East Coast to watch the West Coast games, whatever it may be, people don't think about what's on the Mariners until there's a big trade, like an Adam Jones ends up in Baltimore a few years back, and all of a sudden people are like, holy crap, Adam Jones is good at baseball. He was always good at baseball.
Yep.
So people don't see what these guys got in Seattle when they're not watching them 80 times a year like Mariners fans. The superstars will be superstars. But this is a team game. Look at the Angels. They've had one of, if not the very best player in the game for over a decade, and they've not made the playoffs since, I want to say, they haven't won a playoff game since either 04 or 07. It's a crazy number. The
Yeah, it is.
question is that supporting cast, and I think JP and Randy Arozarena fall in the same spot. Crawford's always been a weird one for me, where my whole life, really, as a Mariners fan, I look back at it. I look at Brendan Ryan. I look at Jack Wilson. I look at Yuniesky Betancourt. And I just look at all these shortstops who were glove first shortstops. And a few years back, I was very frustrated at the front office for inking JP Crawford to an extension because I looked at it and I said, Carlos Correa is on the market that year. And we are hitching our wagon to a glove first shortstop. And a lot of the frustration back then was that Mariners fans, and apparently the front office, would latch on to one really hot month with the bat from JP Crawford and say, yeah, this JP guy, he's really solid. And it's like, look, he's an amazing clubhouse guy, great with the glove, but we can't fool ourselves. And then, yes, a couple of years ago, he did have a really strong breakout season with the bat. He hit that postseason home run off Verlander that basically made him immortal in Mariners circles. Obviously, that series didn't go how we wanted. 18 inning game, and we give up a home run to Jeremy Pena at home. Heartbreaking. Still,
Very
if we get that JP, the JP that played down that stretch run, then JP can be one of the top shortstops in baseball. But honestly, my opinion with JP Crawford is I've seen it so many times over. He will have that breakout month or two. He will be an above average bat, if only just, for the rest of the months of the season. Where he's going to make a difference is that he's a great clubhouse guy, a great culture guy, and he is a phenomenal glove. His range is outstanding. His effort, his first step, and his arm are up there with anybody in the league. If he can hit slightly above average, then his glove keeps him in the lineup. If he has a breakout season, like he did a couple years ago with the bat, if he keeps that hot month going into a hot 3 or 4 months, then I absolutely agree with you. He has the potential to be not just an X factor, but a keystone player for this ball club.
Now, one of the interesting things is the Mariners' top prospect, Colt Emerson, is a shortstop and a third base prospect. So, tell us a little about him, and if there's any other prospects that you're keen on.
Honestly, the state of the farm system is very good right now. Even a couple weeks ago, I saw people debating whether the Mariners had the number one farm system in baseball. Colt is a guy who, in Mariners circles, a lot of people are saying he won't break camp. He'll be a AAA guy to start the season, but we could see him up in the summer, and we will definitely see him up close to the end of the season with roster expansion and the like. If guys get hurt, if guys go down, that could happen even sooner, or if he just tears it up in Tacoma. That's the nice thing about Tacoma being where it is. It's a bus ride. It's absolutely, hey, put your bat in your car, get in the car, get up I-5, you're with Big Club. It's amazing how close those two stadiums are to each other, and it really should, when you think about it, give the Mariners a competitive advantage in terms of rehab assignments and being able to move players back and forth between AAA and the Big Club. Colt's a guy who is absolutely, I think, the third baseman of the future because I don't see JP moving. I think as good as his arm is, I think his range is his better attribute as a defender. And I
I agree.
don't think he's at that point with age where he's going to start dropping off for that. Colt Emerson, we've seen him play very well this spring. He is a big, strong, young guy. He's got a big bat, he's got a big arm, and he profiles as one of those where if the organization tells him, Colt, you're the third baseman, pack on 10, 15 pounds of muscle, strengthen that arm up even more, strengthen that core of those legs up even more, and just hit absolute bombs. You could really see him profiling, and this is high praise, this is optimistic, as a Manny Machado type player if he focuses on beefing up and increasing the power. As far as the rest of the farm system, I think they're in a very good spot. You've got, I'm going to say his name wrong. I believe it's Cole Young, second base prospect, first round draft pick a couple years ago. We've needed a very strong second baseman for years. There were the years with Robbie Cano, but with the exception of Robbie Cano, second base has been a bit of a black hole. That's hard to say that because there were a few very good years of prime Robbie Cano there. But you look at an infield of Cole Young and then probably still JP up the middle. Cole Young and Colt Emerson up the middle when JP starts to age out of it. And you look at Harry Ford as the catcher of the future. Those of y'all who've watched the World Baseball Classic and seen what he's done with Great Britain, you can see that he can handle, now not aces, and it'll be interesting next year with the WBC, because I think next year, 2026, is when we're looking at whether or not Harry Ford is MLB ready. Harry Ford will be back with the Great Britain national team in the World Baseball Classic in 2026. They are in pool play with the US. And obviously, the US is a loaded pitching staff. So watch this space in 2026, because we might be needing to have that uncomfortable conversation about whether Harry Ford or Cal Raleigh need to take the gear off and get over to first base or elsewhere. But I look at that. I look at the minor league system. I look at a guy like a Lazaro Montez, who is still a teenager, mind you, or he might be 20 at this point. But he's a very young, very talented guy. He was with the Single A Everett Aqua Sox, great team name, mind you, last year.
Yep.
And he's broken camp and played in spring training games against big league pitching, and he has not looked uncomfortable at all. He's not a major league player this year, still needs another year of seasoning, but he's another guy who could very quickly climb the ladder, and you could be looking at Lazaro Montez in the outfield as early as 2026. Some of these guys I've mentioned could definitely be injury cover. Obviously, you want the first team dudes to stay healthy. You want the core of the club to stay together across 162 games and on into October. But I look at it as a very strong core for the future. I look at it as depth that I'm not used to seeing in the Mariners. Obviously, this is a long season. Injuries happen. And through my childhood, through my teenage years, I remember watching core guys go down. And even if it was just a couple weeks, there was that, well, we're screwed moment, because who was coming up? Who was coming up I-5 from Tacoma? Who was coming up off the bench? Why is Willie Bloomquist starting 60 games in a row while hitting barely above the Mendoza line? Those days are
Yeah.
gone. Those days are gone. The depth is here. And the fact is, I just said we might have to win with what we've got on offense. And I think the front office has noticed that. And the front office is focused on signing guys out of the Dominican Republic, guys out of Venezuela, drafting well, and doing so on the offensive side of the ball. We can absolutely get pitchers to come here, because it is probably the preeminent pitchers park in baseball. The pitching staff, the coaching, well, they call it the Mariners pitching lab for a reason. The way pitchers come here and just develop into stars almost overnight is well documented at this point. So the focus has really been on getting people who can hit the ball, who can defend behind these arms. And I think we're in a bright spot moving forward.
Now, another one of the sections that I always love about this series is getting a bold prediction. So, what is your bold prediction for the Mariners?
Is it bold to say that a Mariners starter will win the Cy Young? Is it bold to say that, really? Because I think, like I've said, there's 5 potential guys. If George Kirby only misses a start or two, there's 5 potential guys that can contend for it. I think a Mariners starter wins the Cy Young for sure. I think, here's a bold one. There will be multiple 2020 seasons from the Mariners offense.
Okay.
I think Randy Arozarena will get one this year, and I think Julio's a lock to do it again. So I'll give you 2 there. I think a Mariner wins the Cy Young. If I had to put a name on it, this is where it gets bold. I got to put a name on it. I'll go safe. Logan Gilbert.
Yeah.
Cy Young, Logan Gilbert. And 2020 seasons from at least 2 Mariners. If I had to put names to those, I'd say it's Julio. I'd say it's Randy.
Gotcha. So mine's a little bit more on the dark side of things, but I think my bold prediction is that Jerry DePoto gets fired for kind of a lackluster results in the lack of moves. And so that's kind of the direction that I'm going. We saw him get rid of his friend in Scott Service last year, and I think that he ends up putting himself on the chopping block, and he gets let go out of his position for not reinforcing the offense as was needed.
It's a tough take. That is a tough take because I also, at that point, have to go into what the front office politics looks like, and I don't really know. Because obviously he's not officially the general manager. Officially, he handed those reins over to Justin Hollander. And I could sooner see Jerry letting Justin Hollander go and retaking the reins as the GM, because I really don't necessarily know what ownership's mindset on Jerry Dipoto is. Ownership has obviously showed an unwillingness to spend big. I don't know if they regret the Robinson Cano contract. I don't know what it is with Mariners owner John Stanton that he doesn't want to spend big, but I don't know enough about what's going on behind closed doors and in those rooms to genuinely say anything about the state of Jerry Dipoto's job. This might be something that's agreed between them that, hey, this is your line, this is your budget. It could be from higher than Jerry. It could be John Stanton saying, win with what you got. And maybe that is why we've seen the lower level moves, the Donovan Solanos, the Rowdy Telezes, to try to win on a shoestring, which is not something the Mariners need to do. They've shown it before, but it's about the willingness. And when there's no salary cap and there's no salary floor, it really comes down to the man who signs the checks, and that's John Stanton. And if John Stanton has said, this is your budget, then I can't go so far as to say that Jerry Dipoto goes for that. But I think he's definitely frustrated. Some of the stuff he said in the media recently, I could see, if this is a poor season and people start calling for his head, him walking away from it. But it's not nearly sure enough for me to say it's a sure thing, and I just don't know enough about what the politics are in the front office. How much of this is even him? How much of it is Hollander? Who has the reins? What percentage of it is it? And how much of it is John Stanton choking his ability to really be him? He'll definitely make trades.
Yeah.
We know he makes trades. And if those trades go badly, then I could see him being a bit more on the hot seat than he is. He's definitely, in my mind, more on the hot seat with the fan base than he is with the people who actually have the power to send him packing.
No, for sure. Yeah, one of the things that I always referred to Jerry Dipoto as is a vitamin GM, one a day with the trades kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes
Well
out.
said. Well said.
So as we look forward, what's one of the biggest questions facing the team this year?
Well, the biggest question is going to be the bats. And I think a lot of what a lot of guys are going to say is that starts and ends with your 9-figure, decade-long contract man in center field, Julio Rodriguez. He had a down year by his standards last year. By his standards, they're standards that any average major leaguer would take. But he's the core of this team. It does, in a lot of ways, start and stop with him. And he has, across his whole career, especially struggled to get it going in April. He's always kind of struggled to get it started. And then once he does, oh, does it go? But the question with this club is, one, how much can Julio carry this team? And two, how much can the supporting cast around him take the load off of him so that he doesn't have to? I think part of it last year was that Julio, obviously, you look 2 years back, 2023, there was more offense around him. You look back to 2022, especially when the playoff run happened, and there were bats behind Julio Rodriguez that forced you to have to pitch to him. Last year, the offense struggled so mightily that you could just pitch around 44. And of course, his numbers went down. So the question really lies not with Julio, because that's what everyone's asking is, can Julio bounce back? Can Julio carry the team? But the question I have is, can whoever's hitting behind him protect him enough, have a good enough season that he gets more pitches? Because he's a extremely talented baseball player. Julio can 100% carry this team. But how many years have the Angels just down the road said, oh, if only Mike Trout can stay healthy, and then they finish fourth?
Yep.
Because you're putting everything on 27 down there, and if the M's are putting everything on 44, which they're not necessarily, obviously the pitching is a lot stronger than it is in Anaheim.
Agreed.
Obviously, you've got another guy in Cal Raleigh, but you really don't want to ask a catcher to carry a team just because of how taxing the position is.
Yep. Which is where I
it's
think
really about who
your
hits
suggestion
after
was
Julio.
first.
That's where I'm at. Who hits after Julio, and how consistently can that guy or those guys make sure that you don't have a choice but to attack Julio Rodriguez? Because if you attack Julio Rodriguez, he's going to bite you. That's
For
just
sure.
who he is as a ball player.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's interesting, and in my preparation for this series, that was my question: can the offense do enough to support this overwhelmingly good pitching staff? So we're in lockstep there. So kind of on the opposite side, what's the biggest frustration for the fan base? Is it the lack of additions to that offense?
Yeah, 100% it is. 100% it is, because obviously we missed the playoffs by one game with the number 29 offense in baseball last year. I can tell you this one real quick. If the Seattle Mariners were a top half offense in baseball last year, even top 15, I'm not asking you to be top 5. I'm not asking you to be top 10. Top half. It's a pushing 100-win team, especially in what was not an incredibly strong AL West.
Yep.
A top half offense wins 95, 100 ball games. And with that pitching staff, I don't see even that Yankees club that won the AL last year stopping that 2024 Mariners team. You've retained your entire pitching staff. Most of them are still on rookie deals, or at least very,
Close
for
to
what
it.
they're worth, very good value for money deals. And you don't bolster? You don't go out and get a Pete Alonso? You don't go out and get an Alex Bregman? There were guys there. There were players available in trade. You could have gone off the board. I was hearing rumors that Luis Arraez was being shopped. Get me a guy that can get on base in front of those Julios and those Cal Raleighs. Get me anyone. Donovan Solano.
Yep.
And Rowdy Tellez. That is 100% the biggest frustration, because you don't have to be the number one offense in baseball. You don't have to go get Trey Turner. You don't have to become the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Yankees. You don't have to become the Texas Rangers even. If they had the offense of the Minnesota Twins last year, they're a 90-win team. They're a playoff club. And all they had to do was get in with that pitching staff, especially in October, where it's tough to score runs anywhere, but it's especially tough to score runs in the Bronx, in Seattle, in Minnesota, in Cleveland. These are the cities you're going to in October. You're not going, well, if you went to Tampa, it was in a dome anyway. You're not going to the hot places. You're not going to Anaheim. Sorry, Angels fans, I've been brutal to you guys on this. But you're not going to these hot cities. You're not going to 110-degree Kansas City in August. It's October. It's getting cold across the states. And you're looking at Minnesota, Boston, Seattle, Baltimore. These are places that are cold. The ball is not going to fly. And with that pitching staff in October, all they had to do was get in. And then they would have had to go to LA away in the World Series, where the ball would have flown. And you can throw everything I just said out the window. But I remind you, they've been a franchise since 1977. How many AL championships do they have? This many. Breaks my heart. I hear it every year. Who's never been to the World Series? This could have been the year if all they did was bring in. It just feels like it's a 1 or 2 piece away thing. And I'm hoping against all hope that the statisticians, the analytics, the Edgars, and the Kevin Seitzers, who are going to be in charge of the offensive side of the ball this year, have said we have what it takes to be a top 15 offense, because a top 15 offense with that pitching staff is enough. A top 5 offense, I think they're the best team in baseball, but a top 5 offense isn't attainable. It just can't be done from 29th to top 5 in one season. But you look at a guy like a Mitch Garver and you hope. You look at a guy like a Jorge Polanco and you hope that that downturn was growing pains, that that downturn was adjustments, and that now with an off season to work on it, with a new coaching staff behind them, coming back into the same building in the same uniform to do it 81 more times this year, they return to a lot of the form that they had prior to playing in Seattle. Because if they do, then maybe that decision to bet on what was in the room was right. But having that maybe when slight improvements to the offense would have been a sure thing to win this division is the frustration.
So then that kind of leads perfectly into my question. And how would you grade out the offense for the Mariners this year?
It's tough. That's a very tough question because I don't think it's an F. I don't. I think a lot of guys had down years last year. Even Julio had a down year last year. I think the focus from Kevin Seitzer, the hitting coach, from the director of hitting strategy, Hall of Fame designated hitter Edgar Martinez, I remind you, one of the greatest bat to ball hitters of all time,
All time.
at least of the modern generation. The focus is on cutting strikeouts. The focus is on getting the ball in play, bat to ball, working the whole field, which I think is what it needs to be when you're playing in the marine layer, in the cold, in a place like Seattle. Guys like Julio, guys like Cal Raleigh are supremely strong athletes who will still drive the ball. All they got to do is stick the bat out there, and if they run into it, it's going to go. But the guys like the Polancos, the guys like a J.P. Crawford, just get it over the infielders' heads, drop it down, take a nice little 90-foot jog, and let the big boppers bring you in. It's going back to an older time of baseball, really. Station to station, dink and dunk, move the runners. And it's a thing that's fallen out of fashion a lot with the analytics crowd, but it's a thing I've always loved because obviously I've played since I was young and I've never been the biggest, strongest guy in the world. But it was amazing to watch teams play small ball because it was what I lived off of as a player. And it was inspirational for me as a kid. And even at 28 years old, I look at it now and I love a good bunt. I love a cheeky little stolen base or a hit and run or something to just get people thinking, get people moving. And that is, I think, where the Mariners can make a difference, make an impact, is by doing a lot more of that. And then you've got the supremely talented, the guys that, well, if you got in a fight, you'd want them in your corner. The Julios, the Cal Raleighs, a guy like Tellez, who you can whack in the lineup there to do the damage. And you even see it with a dude like Luke Raley last year. The guy had something like 6 bunt hits, and he's a first baseman. He's a big guy. It came from having a good baseball IQ, knowing when to do it, and catching them by surprise.
That's
So
it.
the hope is that with Edgar Martinez and Kevin Seitzer, this offense can be like a solid C. And I think that's attainable. I think the offense can be a solid C. I think if everyone has a year to their full potential, which just isn't realistic, baseball's a game of failure. You fail 7 out of 10 times at the plate for long enough, you're going in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
I think if everybody plays to their potential, you can get a B+ offense out of this. But I think a realistic expectation is a C.
Yeah. We're
And
in
I think
perfect
that'll
love.
surprise a lot of guys.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot of hope for it because I think What Edgar wants out of this team and what Kevin Seitzer is going to try to incorporate is exactly what this team needs to do playing in this ballpark and with the talent that they have in the building.
Yeah, I agree. We are in perfect lockstep in my preparation looking at this team. I have them as a C grade. I think some guys that had down years take step forward. I think you're going to get a lot better of a season out of J Rod, out of Rowley. And I think that, some of those kind of key role player guys are going to take steps forward offensively to help this team progress forward. So we're
Those are
in
the
perfect.
question marks. Those are the
Yep.
question marks, really, is those, like we said, the Arozarenas, the JP Crawfords, the Luke Rayleys. If they have good years, if they have slightly above average years, this is a team that can fight.
And so then how would you grade out the pitching staff?
Easiest question ever. That is an A. They were the number one pitching staff in baseball last year. They've gotten a year older, a year wiser. Every pitcher just about has come into camp with something new. If I want to ask a question, it's the bullpen depth, because obviously you look at the top end of the bullpen, you look at a guy like Andres Munoz, who could very easily be the best closer in baseball this year if he wants to be, and that is some fierce competition. You've got fierce competition with guys like Camilo Doval. You've got fierce competition with guys, Minnesota. Am I going to space on his name?
Yohan Duran.
Yohan Duran, 99-mile-an-hour splinker, absolutely disgusting. You've got fierce competition across baseball. Emmanuel Clase in Cleveland. But I
Mason
think
Miller.
Andres Munoz has the stuff to be the best closer in baseball. He should, health being a thing, be an all-star again. And he's added a kick change, which is the Instagram baseball coach's new favorite thing in the world.
Yes, it is.
I've tried to throw it. It's a nice little thing. You just throw it and you're like, how'd that happen? But you look at the pitching staff, the starting rotation has 5 potential Cy Youngs in it. You look at a guy who's going to start the season in Tacoma and Emerson Hancock. He may get a couple spot starts with Curb out. But most likely he's going to start the season as a Tacoma Rainier. He'll be a Tacoma Rainier come May, at least. He's probably a number 3 in a lot of major league rotations already. The question really becomes, when you're in the dog days of it, when you're in July, August, and you've got that August road trip and you're in Texas, Houston, Kansas City, somewhere hot, and you're a bunch of games on the bounce. Munoz is pitched. Brash, back from injury, has pitched. All these guys have pitched, and you're getting down to the bottom of the barrel in the bullpen. Who are you going to? Who are you giving the ball to? And is he going to execute to the quality of the rest of the Mariners staff? But to be fair, if that's your biggest worry, you look back to the 2022, the 2023 teams, and even with the exception of a little bit of a struggle through the middle of the year, the 2024 team as well, Los Bomberos in the bullpen, they were lights out. There were some
Yep.
struggles in 24, but you've got to think they were almost historically good bullpen numbers the 2 years prior.
Yep.
We've been spoiled with that. So it's the easiest question in the world. The pitching staff's an A. They were the number 1 pitching staff in baseball last year. I'd be surprised if they're any less than the number 2 or 3 this year. And I already told you, my bold prediction is the Cy Young is going to the Pacific Northwest, and I'm going to stand by that. Pitching
Yeah.
staff will be May, and it should be enough to give them a chance to win every night. 4 runs probably wins you most games if you're the Seattle Mariners this coming year. That's how good
Yeah,
this pitching staff is.
I agree 100%. We're in lockstep. It would have been an A plus, but there are a little bit of questions about the full length of depth in the bullpen. But it's an easy A. It's one of the easiest grades in doing this series and
Baseball.
covering every team. That was one of the easiest grades to kind of put together for sure. The strength of that rotation, and even with Kirby potentially missing a couple of starts, I still believe that this rotation is the best in baseball. And as you said, at worst, second or third at worst. So, yeah, definitely an
I
easy
don't know
A
who
on that.
takes it. I don't know who takes it. That's my question would be if you want to name me another team that's going to come close. Dodgers? Dodgers. And that's
Depth.
really it.
Mhm.
The Dodgers have 6 starters that would make every rotation in baseball.
Yeah.
But other than the Dodgers, there's not another team that comes close. And that's why I think, well, you know what? I'll wait. I'll wait because I know what the next question is.
So that leads into the next question, and we look at the divisional ranking predictions. Pacoda has the Mariners coming in third with 86 wins, and Fangraphs has them coming in second with 84 wins. Where do you see the Mariners finishing, and what does that win total look like?
Tough question. Really tough question because it does come down to the offense. I will say this. I don't see the AL West as a particularly strong division this year. I don't think it was a particularly strong division last year. And I don't think most of the clubs in the AL West did a lot to get better this offseason. I don't think Houston got better. I think they regressed. And I think Houston is the biggest threat. I realize the Texas Rangers just won a World Series a couple of years ago. I realize Jacob DeGrom is coming back into this season healthy for now. Show me a season Jacob DeGrom has pitched a full season in the last 8 years.
Yep.
I realize that Mike Trout is healthy. I don't care. Anthony Rendon's already out for the season. Syndergaard is aging, and see what I said about DeGrom. Again, Angels fans have been brutal to you. I'm sorry, but I just don't see that team as a threat. And the A's literally don't have a city in their name.
Yeah.
They have Brent Rooker. They have a very good baseball player in Brent Rooker who's very fun to watch. But I think the easy two in this division, you're looking at Sacramento, but don't call them that, 5. You're looking at Anaheim, but apparently we can't call them that either, 4. Anaheim is nowhere near LA for those of you who've never been to California. I think you're looking at the Texas Rangers and Houston Astros as teams that are going to profile in a very similar spot. And it's really going to come down to Seattle's offense, whether they're right there with those two teams or whether they're a cut above. I think this is a very winnable division. I think if you put Seattle in the AL East, the players would be livid for having to fly 6 hours to most of their road games. But if you put Seattle in the AL East, I think they're probably a 4th or 5th place team easily, just because that offense doesn't hold up. But with Seattle in this very, very winnable AL West, yes, I have fan bias, but I think that this team can win this division. Even as it is, I think it can win this division. The safe thing to do is to split the difference and say that it comes second, because I think surely one of Houston or Texas will fall behind this Mariners ball club. But I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be hopeful. I'm going to bank on the pitching. And I'm going to say that 88 to 91 wins, somewhere in that ballpark, gets it done. I think obviously with the change to scheduling that happened a couple of years ago where every team plays every team now, that hurts teams in divisions like the AL Central, the AL West, where you can prey off those kind of minnow ball clubs. It definitely shifts the balance of power in the wild card back to places like the AL East, where instead of playing Boston those extra couple times, you now get to play the Colorado Rockies, where you would only have played them once every 3 years. But the thing is, now Seattle gets to play the Colorado Rockies 3 times. And it's very frustrating to look at the schedule, because if you've looked at the Mariners' schedule, the last 3 ball games of the season are against the reigning world champions. And as a fan, all I can hope is that those 3 games won't matter.
Yeah.
At the very least, that they won't matter for the Dodgers, and they'll be playing September call-ups to try to keep them healthy. But you hope that they won't matter for the Mariners. I think this one's going to go right down to the wire, and I think it'll be a 3-horse race. I look at the Texas Rangers, and I see a lot of the same issues the Mariners have. I see a lot of depth issues. Yes, you've got a guy, you've got a Marcus Semien, you've got a Corey Seager in the center of that lineup. But I just see them struggling to turn the lineup over. You look at the 7, 8, 9 in the Texas Rangers lineup, and it doesn't feel like a division winning lineup. I will believe it when I see it, when you try to tell me that Jacob deGrom's going to stay healthy. So for me, I have the Texas Rangers finishing third in that division. And I look back at where the Mariners were in May and June with a solid division lead. Let's not bring up the statistical record that the Mariners broke for biggest division lead blown past a certain date, because I don't remember exactly what it is, but it hurts my heart to think about.
I can imagine.
I don't see that Houston Astros team better. I don't see it as stronger than it was. So for me, if the Bats take a slight step forward, which we've been saying they should, then a Mariners team that missed the playoffs by 1 game last year should be able to squeak in. So it's bold. 100%, I'm grading this offseason an F for the lack of additions. But I grade the underachievement of the 2024 team as significant enough that if they play to potential, they're an 88, 89 win team. And I think that's enough to win a weak AL West. And if it's not, there's 3 wildcard teams these days. The AL East will eat itself, as it always does. And I think 88 gets you that 3rd wildcard spot. So I think that if this Mariners team stays healthy and plays to potential, we should be expecting a return to October baseball in the Pacific Northwest. And anything less, I think your bold prediction comes true, and Jerry's got to go.
Yep. So then that perfectly leads into kind of the final question, which ties into the name of this series. What is the state of the franchise for the Seattle Mariners?
It's a very curious question, because the state of the franchise for the Seattle Mariners is a tale of 2 ball clubs. It is a tale of 2 ball clubs because it is a 3rd place offense at best, carried by some superstars that should definitely be all-stars, anchored around a World Series caliber pitching staff. They are not a rebuilding ball club anymore. They are in the middle of their window. They're in the middle of their contention window. And I imagine fans younger than me will really be ruining it if this front office does not take advantage of this window. This is a Mariners team that should win an American League championship in the next 3 to 5 years. And it is on the front office to give them the tools to do so. They're not going to be able to afford to keep every single one of these pitchers forever. But right now, you're looking at a rotation like the early 2000s Braves, the Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz era Braves. These were teams that were competing for championships and running into buzzsaw Yankees teams in the World Series. There is a buzzsaw at Chavez Ravine in the name of the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, if you can hold any lineup in baseball to 4 runs or less on any given night, and I think this Mariners team can, you can go toe-to-toe with anyone in a 7-game series. If you just get in, ideally not as a wild card, because as my dad always told me, on any given night, any team in baseball can beat any team in baseball. So a 3-game series is a very small sample size. But in a 7-game series, the cream rises to the top. If this team can do enough with the bats to win the division, the arms can carry it to a pennant. So it is a very feast or famine team. It is a very, it will be there or it won't team. And I think we will know by the All-Star break which one it is. I don't foresee another mass collapse like the Mariners had last year, where they start hot and fall apart. It's either going to be a case of, yeah, they're getting in, or it's going to be a case of what were they thinking in the offseason? Where were the moves? And Jerry Dipoto is going to have to go. If they get in, they can hang with anybody. And if they get in, you're looking at some knockdown, drag-out wars between that Yankees lineup, that new Red Sox lineup, and this Mariners pitching staff for the AL title. Can they beat the Dodgers in 7 if they get there? I don't know. I don't want to say that. I don't like what I'm seeing in LA. They're building a dynasty down there, but I'm not here to talk about the Dodgers. I'm here to talk about the Mariners. I think they can get there. And once they get there, if you can hold any lineup in baseball to 4 runs or less a night, why can't you do it against that one too? And if you can hold any lineup in baseball to 4 runs or less a night, in the right circumstances, one swing is all it takes to equal that. So, what's the state of the Mariners? 100% they're contenders. But the question is, I don't think this year is the year to win at all. Can they do enough to convince the front office to go all in? Because the key pieces are already there. They're 1-2 pieces away. They're 1-2 impact guys away from being the favorites to win the American League. They're still a dark horse. They're absolutely still a dark horse this year. They're going to have to go through a buzzsaw in October. But if they get in, anything can happen. And if anything happens, then you could be looking at the 2026, 2027 Mariners as the ones who are going down to LA in October to try to dethrone a monster. I'm optimistic, but cautiously so.
Yep, and that's a great thing to be if you're a Mariners fan, to have that optimism in this ball club. As you said, that pitching staff is one to be optimistic in. So I want to thank you, Mike, for joining me here to discuss the state of the Seattle Mariners franchise. Let everybody know where they can kind of get more content and more conversation from you about the Mariners and about baseball in general.
Yeah, been an absolute pleasure. Find me, let's see, Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, Instagram, TikTok, which I never post on, but I have. It's all at Mike Delgado 12. And obviously, I'm based in the UK, so my hours are going to be a little bit different. Baseball's been my life since I was 6 years old. I've got my own season playing in the British National Baseball League as well. I'll be back in Seattle in April. I'm going to try to catch as many games as I can. So anybody who happens to be at the ballpark or around, Twitter or Instagram, best 2 bets at Mike Delgado 12. Absolutely shoot me a message. Game's been my life for so long, and it's awesome to be engaging with the community, talking about a game that has given so much to me and hopefully given back to it both in Europe and back in the States. Thanks again for having me. Best of luck to the season. And for all the Mariners fans out there watching, stay true to the blue. Trident's up. Let's go Mariners.
For sure. So once again, this has been a fun conversation with Mike here discussing the Seattle Mariners. If you're checking out this discussion here on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the bell for post notifications. So each and every time we drop new content, you will be notified. And if you're checking us out, make sure you hit that link tree in the description below that has all the pertinent details to our merch store, sponsor links, including our new partnership and affiliate partnership with Topps Sports Card Trading Company, as well as our social platforms and audio platforms. And if you're listening on the audio side of things, make sure you leave a 5-star rating review as we continue to try to build up this Baseball Banter Broadcast community. Once again, Mike, thank you for joining us. This has been a pleasure for me discussing the Mariners. It's a fun team to pay attention to, as we detailed in great length with that pitching staff. It's one of the most fun to watch on a nightly basis. So thank you once again for joining me, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.